Good morning, everyone. This is Danielle Delaquila and Melissa Noor, and we work for drjockers.com. Melissa is our online health coach, and I'm the functional nutritionist. And we've both been with Dr. Jockers for you've been writing for him for over a year and a half now, haven't you, Melissa?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's so cool. And we've both been doing nutritional coaching for like the past year and a quarter or so, right?
Yeah.
Last year we started at the same time, which is pretty cool. So welcome, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Today, Melissa and I are here to talk about 7 factors that cause autoimmune disease. We're going to go over each one of them in detail. And first, Melissa is going to start off by giving us basically just a general background of autoimmune disease and share some statistics with us. So go ahead, Melissa.
Good morning, guys. We thought this was a great topic since we talked about the immune system last week. So we wanted to follow it up with autoimmunity. It's over 250 million people worldwide have an autoimmune condition. That's just staggering. And it's the 3rd leading cause of chronic disease in the United States. There's over 100 different types. It can affect your brain, your blood, your GI tract, your nerves, thyroid, bones, muscle, skin, and lungs. Some common ones that you've probably heard of are MS and autism, leukemia, lupus, celiac disease, type 1 diabetes, thyroid, Graves, and also Hashimoto's are 2 autoimmune. We see that a lot in our coaching practice, but it's really what it is it's when your body's own immune system, and we talked about your immune system and how it's there to protect our bodies and to attack the foreign pathogens that enter our bodies. But what happens with autoimmune conditions is your body's immune system is actually attacking healthy tissues. Mm-hmm. So we're going to look at today, what are some of the causes? What makes our body start attacking itself?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thanks, Melissa. That's a great intro. So now we're going to go over their 7 main factors that contribute to autoimmune disease. And the first one, I'm sure we can all guess, poor gluten. It's so demonized, and sometimes rightfully so. I've been listening to, I think Mark Hyman just had Alessio Fasano on like a week or 2 ago on his podcast. And I've been listening for the past couple of days, like on and off, to Alessio Fasano speaking. And if anyone doesn't know Alessio Fasano, he's with Harvard Medical School, and he's also at Boston Children's Hospital. I actually took my daughter to Boston Children's Hospital several years ago for something, and we were in the office that he was in, or the office was next door, and I felt like I was like near a celebrity. So Alessio Fasano is a doctor who studies non-celiac gluten sensitivity. And he actually is the one who discovered gluten's effects on the intestinal permeability. And that it actually like promotes this component called zonulin, which is responsible for opening up the intestinal wall every time someone eats gluten. Not some people, every time everyone eats gluten. And so, and it may cause issues for someone, or it may not. So everyone's responsive, or everyone has a different response. But let's get back to just what gluten is itself, right? It's this sticky protein that's found in certain grains like wheat and barley and rye and kamut and spelt. And it often can have like effects on the digestive system. And I think that some people understand certain diseases like autoimmune diseases like celiac, and they understand that they have to stay away from the protein gluten. And what celiac does is basically it's an autoimmune response on the villi. So we have these little villi in our small intestines that are responsible for the digestion and absorption of our food. And, you know, it's an incredibly large surface area. And so without those villi there, we don't have the ability to absorb nutrients quite as well. So with celiac disease, those villi and the microvilli, which are other little tiny I almost think of them as like hair-like structures on top of the villi, they become flattened. And so then we become malnourished because we're not able to absorb as many nutrients. So celiac disease is very dangerous, and that's one of the biggest autoimmune diseases. But there's something else called non-celiac gluten sensitivity. And there's some mainstream doctors that are still sort of poo-pooing this. And Dr. Alessio Fasano is working really hard to get that out into the mainstream and help people understand that this is really an issue and that these symptoms can be extremely varied. It could be from digestive issues, it could be skin issues, it could be anxiety, depression, fatigue. Everyone responds very differently. The first time I realized that I had non-celiac gluten sensitivity was after I did the master cleanse about 9 years ago. You know, the cayenne pepper, the maple syrup, and the lemon juice. And I did it for a week. And after I came off of it, I ate wheat, and all of a sudden I got depressed. So for me, it really makes me depressed. Since then, it's also caused digestive symptoms. For some people, it's irritability, hair loss, brain fog is a big one. So anyways, this is one of the biggest things. So like I said before, the biggest reason that this can lead to autoimmune disease has to do with the intestinal wall and the component zonulin that really opens up the intestinal, or the junctions, the tight junctions in between our intestinal cells, leading to issues like autoimmune.
Awesome.
So go ahead, Melissa, and talk to us about GMOs.
Well, according to the World Health Organization, I know a lot of people wonder, what is a GMO? Everybody talks about GMO, but do you really know what it is? And so I got a definition for everyone. GMOs are organisms in which the genetic material, which is their DNA, has been altered in such a way that it does not occur naturally. And the American Academy of Environmental Medicine came out with a statement that GMOs pose serious health risk. And yet they're still allowed in America. Over 60 countries have labeling and restrictions or bans on GMOs, but we still allow them in America. So it's really important to try to avoid them, but they do contribute to autoimmune because they affect your immune function. They can also cause accelerated aging and metabolic issues like insulin dysregulation. And also digestive issues like Danielle was talking about with gluten. GMOs can also cause digestive issues. So really important to avoid GMOs, particularly if you have an autoimmune, but I recommend that everyone avoid them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember listening to this probably like 6 or 7 years ago, that GMOs have the same effect with the whole intestinal permeability, increasing the chances of particles leaking out into our bloodstream. And basically what ends up happening is when these particles leak out into our bloodstream, our body doesn't recognize them, right? And so our body forms antibodies to be able to protect ourselves from them and fight them off. Well, those proteins or components might look like parts of our thyroid gland, or parts of our pancreas, or parts of our joint linings, or parts of our brain. And then our body is those antibodies are attacking parts of our body as well, causing these the autoimmune issues. So thanks, Melissa, for talking about that. One thing I forgot to put in here, but I'm going to talk about it now. My bad, is I forgot to put a thing up for gut dysfunction. So that's the next thing we're going to talk about. But I just want to say hi to a few people who are listening in. This is Kim Jagger. Not sure where you're from, Kim, but thanks for joining us. And let's see. Carol has a question, or she's a statement. If you discuss thyroid, specifically Hashimoto's, I was recently diagnosed and placed on a compounded T2, T4, I think she means T3, cortisol and selenium, whereas wasn't having any symptoms that I knew of other than trouble losing weight before the meds. Now I feel like poo most of the time. Needless to say, I'm frustrated. Any suggestions? Let's see. So she was placed on cortisol. Like, just checking in, Carol, like, you're given cortisol, because that can that might be the reason. Like perhaps you had normal or high cortisol to begin with, and if they're giving you cortisol or cortisol raising supplements, that might be the reason why you're not feeling so great to begin with. And as far as the compounded, I'm guessing you're talking about T3, T4. Melissa or I would be willing to check out your initial blood work and what they base this on. So if you want to connect with us, you can check our website and look for our emails, and we could talk about this in a little bit more of a personal matter. So I'm going to talk a little bit about gut dysfunction right now. And I think many of you have heard that about 80% of our immune system is in our gut. So our gut, with all of its microbes, kind of is our first line of defense as far as pathogens go. And that there's this direct connection between the gut via the vagus nerve to the brain. And so there's this huge connection. And, they also say like our gut is our second brain. And when we have things like dysbiosis or a poor bacteria balance, this is extremely associated with pretty much every autoimmune disease that's out there. And reason being is that, again, when we're going to have these bad microbes going on in our gut, that is going to lead to extra toxins, and the toxins have the same effect on the intestinal wall. They can either like leak through the cells themselves, or they may in fact have issues with opening up the tight junctions also, and causing intestinal impermeability and leading to overall inflammation in the whole body. So dysbiosis is another big issue that can lead to autoimmune disease. Melissa is going to talk about neurological stress next.
Yes, your nervous system and your immune system, they work together. And so if you have subluxation, which is basically misalignment of your spine, which compresses and irritates your nervous system, when that happens, that can alter your immune function. So what can cause that? Well, any type of trauma, like a car accident, of course, or a fall, can stress the spine. But one thing that we don't pay enough attention to is our posture. So making sure that you're sitting up straight and having correct posture, doing exercises for posture. Danielle and I were talking about that yesterday. And also chiropractic care and massage can also be great for your nervous system. So something people don't think about that much as far as autoimmune, but there's definitely a connection there between your nervous system and your immune system.
Yeah, really important. And good posture will help with so many things, with our breathing, giving space for our organs. And they've done studies before where people go in for job interviews, and when they're hunched over, they don't seem as confident. They don't end up getting the job. When you're sitting up straight, you speak a lot more loudly. You speak differently to people when you have good posture versus when you don't have good posture. So, and I think like you kind of think differently about yourself too. I think it's an important thing to think about. So Deborah Verall from Adelaide, Australia, just messaged and said, a trial has started here with a vaccine for celiacs to be able to eat what they cannot eat. I don't understand what that means exactly. I'm not familiar with this. Have you heard anything about this, Melissa?
No, not at all. So I would definitely be skeptical, though.
I don't know. So some sort of trial, like maybe telling people that they can't. I don't know exactly what you're talking about, Deborah. Maybe if you want to chime in and help us understand that a little bit more, maybe we could comment better on it. But thank you.
Just something to add, though, a lot of the foods that contain gluten are unhealthy foods anyway. So there's more reasons to avoid them other than just that it has gluten. So just another consideration, I've been gluten-free for 6 years and I don't miss it. There's so many other options out there now. I talked about that a lot when we did the shopping Facebook Live. So maybe go back and look at that, because there's a lot of things out there that you can substitute for the pastas and breads. And I really don't think you'll miss it, and your overall health will improve because of it.
Yeah, I agree with you, Melissa. You know, you talk about how like these wheat in and of itself is not that nutrient dense.
Right.
And the nutrients that are in there are actually not that well absorbed because of the phytates that are found in there. So, things like zinc, and the little bit of iron that could be in there, none of which are absorbed very well. So you're not doing your body a disservice by not including it in your diet.
Right.
So the next thing we want to talk about are toxins and the detoxification ability of our body. So there's about 80,000 different toxic chemicals that are used regularly in the United States every day. And so that's a pretty scary figure right there. And when they've done autopsies on bodies, they've found 500 chemicals that are stored in the average body, 7 pesticides found in our urine. So that's pretty crazy to think about. Even if you live a life of, trying to not have as many toxins in your body as possible, like trying to use all natural products on your body, trying to not spray chemicals on your lawn, don't have air fresheners in your house, use, all natural cleaning products, you're still living in the United States. And if there's 80,000 chemicals, being used on a daily basis, we're bound to get exposed to them. And so when we're overloaded with these chemicals, our body really loses its ability to detoxify. It just becomes overwhelmed. Usually what the body does is it turns these fat-soluble toxins via enzymes into these inactive water-soluble metabolites and gets rid of them. But like I said, when we get overwhelmed, we lose the ability to do this. Some folks have genetic polymorphisms that basically these people end up losing the ability or don't have the ability to detoxify. So we need to make sure we supplement with things like glutathione. We talked about glutathione last week, that really helps our body's detoxification process pathway. So again, when we have a buildup of toxins in our body, again, that's going to lead to leaky gut or intestinal impermeability, contributing to the autoimmune disease. Okay, Melissa, you're up.
Talk about stress. Stress affects everything. I tell all my clients, stress, sleep, and nutrition, all 3 equally important. That chronic low-grade stress, it's epidemic in the United States, probably worldwide, but, it causes a sluggish metabolism, inflammation. We talked a lot about inflammation in one of our Facebook Lives, but it also affects your immune system. It depletes your nutrients, it oxidizes cells, causes digestive issues, leaky gut, and we talked about the connection between leaky gut and autoimmune. So there's many autoimmune conditions that they have associated with stress hormone production as a catalyst for those autoimmune conditions. So it's really critical to try to minimize stress. We all have stress, but the chronic stress you've got to try to minimize. So just something to consider in addition to everything else we've talked about, because it's, it affects your hormones, it affects your body, and it's just, it also, your brain, it accelerates brain degeneration. So a lot of different things that stress can do to our bodies, and just one of those things that you've got to make a priority. Sure. Another reason to get massages. 2 reasons to get massages. That's what you can take away from here.
Yeah, get a massage.
Get a massage.
You deserve it. And just to add to that, Melissa, is, we often think of stress as an emotional thing. And some folks that I've worked with, they say, oh, I don't feel emotionally stressed. I've got a pretty low stress life. Well, if you have a chronic infection, which is what I'm going to talk about next, that promotes the same physiological response as far as like increased cortisol in your body as does emotional stress. So if you have a gut infection or some other kind of infection in your body, such as herpes, Lyme disease, H. pylori, SIBO, candida, parasites, HPV, the list goes on and on as far as infections go, that you might have this sort of stress response also, which again leads to the whole leaky gut thing. I can remember when I had a very, very stressful period of my life about 4 years ago. I was going through my divorce, and all of a sudden this is so interesting. I don't know if I ever told you this, Melissa. All of a sudden, I started my knuckles of my fingers started swelling, and so
wow.
a prime example of stress causing leaky gut. And for me, it ended up being anytime I ate non-grass-fed cheese. But let me tell you, it took me 6 months to figure it out.
Yeah.
Non-grass-fed cheese was causing, I don't know if it was at the beginnings of RA, rheumatoid arthritis. Like, I don't know. I never really had it like diagnosed. All I know is I was able to figure out what it was, pinpoint it, and get it out of my diet. And I was better after that. So Deborah from Australia chimed in again. She said, it's hoped the treatment will allow the immune system's abnormal toxic response to gluten to be reprogrammed, allowing 160,000 Australians with celiac disease to avoid a strict, lifelong gluten-free diet. Wow. So it sounds like they're reintroducing this in hopes that the body will be able to. Wow. So the vaccine is going to inoculate something in them, and the hope is that their immune system will be able to now handle gluten. Interesting. I'm going to check in on that, Deborah. Thanks for sharing that with us. I have not heard.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah. So thanks for sharing. So the next thing we want to talk about, and my little I didn't get capitalized there, for GI Map Stool Test. So this is a fairly new test that we're carrying with Dr. Jockers, and it happens to be my favorite test these days. And this can be a test that can measure infection in our body. So our GI Map Stool Test is available on our website. It's $459, worth every penny because it tells us a lot about what's going on in your body. So it measures and tells you how much of good bacteria you have. It looks at the pathogenic bacteria. It looks at autoimmune potential trigger bacteria. Looks at parasites, protozoa, worms, yeast and fungal markers. It also looks at viruses like the Epstein-Barr virus, norovirus. I just had someone yesterday that showed up with the norovirus, had no symptoms whatsoever, which is interesting. And then it looks like digestion and absorption markers, inflammatory markers. It even has the anti-gliadin, which is usually associated with celiac disease. So it has a ton of different markers on it, and I highly recommend, if you're suspicious of some sort of infection, to order this test. And it comes with a 10-minute complimentary phone call to discuss your results. So if you're interested, check it out.
It's a great test. I had a client yesterday with a tapeworm, and she doesn't have any symptoms of that, so she was very surprised. But that comes from undercooked pork. So
wow.
Another reason to avoid pig too. Anyway, so I was going to talk a little bit about our autoimmune program. It's a program that Dr. Jockers has developed. It covers the key foundational strategies to address the causes of chronic inflammation and leaky gut. It's basically an advanced food elimination diet with adrenal support protocol. It's a 6-week program. I use that with a lot of my clients. With autoimmune or with other issues too, because of the inflammation. If I have a client with chronic inflammation, I'll often put them on that because it does eliminate the foods that are inflammatory triggers. So, but it's a really good program. If you want to go to the website, there's a section for programs. It's under there if you want to learn more about it.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Melissa, for joining me this morning. And thank you, everyone out there who has joined us. I hope you learned a little bit more about what contributes to autoimmune disease. And if you have an autoimmune disease that you'd like some help with, contact Melissa or me. We'd love to help guide you through this and help you. Or if you're suspicious of an autoimmune disease, connect with us and we could help you order the right test to try to figure out what's going on inside of you. I know that oftentimes people who are sick feel awfully alone, especially when they go to their regular doctor and, they keep getting told time and time again, you're fine, everything's good, everything's great. But, we look at markers, for example, like thyroid markers. We look at more narrow margins on the labs as far as numbers go. So we try to catch things before they're an issue.
Mhm.
You know, I had a client last year come to me, and she knew she had hypothyroid, but she was never told for 3 decades, never told she had Hashimoto's. She came to me and her thyroid antibodies, which are supposed to be under 1, were over 1,000. And
Yeah,
so these
wow.
aren't even things some doctors are even looking at. So save your organs, save your tissues, and do your best. It's worth reaching out to someone who knows the diseases. So anyway, have a great Wednesday, everyone, and hopefully you'll join us again next week. Have a great day. Bye,
Bye,
Melissa.
everyone.